Hello and welcome to today's broadcast on end user support strategies for the digital era, brought to you by Insight. Before we begin, I want to cover a few housekeeping items. This webcast is designed to be interactive between you and the presenters. The webcast console you are looking at can be completely customized. You can resize or move any of the windows that you have open. If you have any questions during the webcast, you can click on the Q&A widget at the bottom and submit your question. All questions from this webcast will be captured and our speakers will answer throughout the presentation. If you are experiencing any technical difficulties, please visit the webcast help guide by clicking on the question mark icon below the presentation window. The help guide covers common technical issues. I would now like to turn over this presentation to our speakers, David and John. The floor is yours.
Why, thank you. So let's just start with some quick intros. My name is David Downs, and I'm a product owner for Insight. And what that means is I get to have a really fun job where I interact with a lot of our customers to understand kind of what's going on in the industry, where their needs, and then also have ties into Gartner, Forrester, IDC, all the big research firms, and kind of take all the data points and we're able to create better products to take to market. Today, we're specifically talking about end user support. And so ultimately, what we're looking to do is provide a better user experience when it comes to getting support in IT and do it at a better price point. So that's what we'll focus on today. And John?
Yeah, so I'm John Casebeer. I'm a product manager. I work closely with product owners like David, making sure that we have collateral that explains our offerings to all of you, and then also help him come up with pricing and contract information that would go into actually you purchasing the product or service from us. And I cover this topic as well as other things like our depot services and lab services that are also around the product themselves, laptops and desktops and phones.
Yeah, that's a good point, John, because obviously the end user experience is more than just when they're using the device, but if they have issues with the device, what does that mean, right? So it kind of covers the whole gamut of the user experience with devices and software and access and identity and security, all kind of integrated here. So I think, over the past few years, we've all experienced a radical change of how we do work these days. Many headquarter offices are closing or shrinking. Branch offices are becoming less and less. Remote workers have really picked up. And IT in general has struggled a little bit when it came to, how do we support this new dynamic? And that's what we're really going to focus on today. And, when it comes to this work from anywhere approach, certainly employees want to be able to work from the coffee shop, at home, potentially on vacation, but just wherever they are, I want to be able to log in on either my laptop, my phone, and get what I need to do my job. But because of that, obviously support has become a lot more complicated. The number of tickets around identity and access has really jumped up over the past couple of years. IT asset management databases have become hard to track. And ultimately, when somebody does need break fix services, so a device is broken, when I used to work in the office, I could go down the hall and my friend Nor would be able to get me a new device that same day. It doesn't work that way anymore. And I was presenting with Microsoft recently on security, and they said that over 50% of device refreshes that are out of band, so not at the end of the 3-year refresh cycle, but just it's happening during the cycle, are because of security issues. Somebody hacked the account, they've got through a phishing or direct into the device. And so most refreshes are happening because of that. Well, when you have a distributed workforce, how do you deal with that properly? And at the end of the day, a lot of companies are saying it's got more expensive. We've had to hire more people to do these kind of support work for our employees. Ticket counts, which up until the COVID era, we saw a decline. They're heading up, and handle time is increasing as well. So it just takes more techs to do all this type of work.
And David, one thing you picked up too is when you're doing remote support, you also bring in more complexity on your connectivity, right? So if that person's working in a Starbucks or from home and has a bad DSL connection, they might be thinking they're having an application performance issue or a device issue, but really it's their connectivity to the last mile, right?
Absolutely.
And the support desk needs tools to be able to troubleshoot that end-to-end connectivity to see where a problem might be happening.
Yeah, there's certainly an application out there that most of us use for collaboration that gets a bad rap for having, really bad performance. But, we have tools today that can say, hey, we know that you are 55 feet from your wireless access point. The issue isn't the app. That's what we need to get to the root cause of to help to resolve the issue, right?
Right. Yeah.
So kind of in this, brave new world, if you will, what we do know is that employees really like to do things themselves whenever possible. So as opposed to having to do the traditional way to call or chat into the service desk or, knock on the door of my buddy next door, if you give me a tool where I could do things like, reset my passwords, I can download my own applications that I need, um, if I need access to the share drive, give me a way to do that. How can we empower self-service so that less tickets, less IT resources needed, and kind of back to the overall, how do we provide a better experience at a lower cost? Self-service is a big part of that, and we'll talk about that in more depth today. If you do get one-on-one support with a live agent, there's different ways to do that today than we've seen historically. A lot of people like to do appointment scheduling. So the end user is able to say, hey, Thursday between 2 and 3, I'm available to talk to somebody. They can go into my computer, remote in, and try to resolve things for me. So appointment scheduling, we've seen a huge uptick in that as a support channel. For those offices that still have a large on-site presence, you see this especially in manufacturing, call centers where you still have that kind of dynamic. We do a lot of walk-up support service desks, so not waiting in line. It's kind of the Apple Genius Bar experience. And then there's kind of a hybrid of that, a virtual support desk where we call Tech Hub, and we'll get into that more too. But it's just a interesting way to really support users in a way that's very convenient for them. And then on the far right here, lockers, vendings, we see these all the time, obviously at the Amazon lockers for picking up devices or whatnot, or airports for peripherals. But this has really spiked as far as the corporate environment's concerned, seeing more and more companies deploy these devices because of the ease of use of, the end user. I need this for my next travel. I'm just going to pick it up from the locker. We also see this used a lot of times for exchanging devices. So you have your refresh program, you're at the 3-year mark. Maybe you still have a lot of people that could drive into the office. They don't work from the office, but they're close. Well, just send them a code for the locker. They come in, put their old device in, take the new one out, and off they go, off and running. John, anything to add to this slide?
Yeah, no, I know, and at least in my life here, having this appointment scheduling has gotten a lot better for, insight problems I've had. And just, for whatever reason, it's something that you can limp along with and you'd rather get something done and you just say, hey, can I just meet tomorrow at 8? It's just a real convenient way to make sure you're optimizing your end user's time, but also, you really can design your staffing model around when somebody actually has to be there helping somebody. So it's a win-win, I think, for a company.
Yeah, like I said, we'll get into that one in more depth later, and we even have some screenshots of what the user experience is like. But ultimately, it's looking at technicians' calendars for free time. You get to pick your free time that matches. It puts an invite on both people's calendars, and then you use your corporate collaboration tool to dial in at the same time. And it's just like any other meeting, but now you have a one-on-one meeting with that expert tech that's going to get to the root cause of your issue and either get it resolved in that call, or in the case we talked about, maybe you have to get a new device sent, worst case scenario, they can take care of that for you as well. All right, so when we talk about IT support, and we talked about cost, and this slide is going to get into cost, but there's kind of different levels of support. Traditionally, we kind of start in the middle. We're going to call the service desk, try to get help. Generally speaking, you get about a 70% first call resolution rate. But those 30% that aren't resolved get escalated up the ladder. So then they go to the desktop or on-site support, or hybrid support if you're working from home, which we call Tech Hub, and we'll go into that. And certainly some tickets have to get escalated above that level to level 3. But what we're really trying to drive toward is a shift left approach. And shift left simply means trying to resolve the issue at the least price point cost channel. And self-service very inexpensive when somebody does their own. But now we're even seeing a level -1. We have a slide on this as well, of course. But we're using DEX software, digital experience software. So that instead of waiting for an issue to happen, now we're becoming proactive, preventative, and doing anything we can in order to kind of heal things before they cause issues through automation. And it's not just healing one, it's a mass heal type of approach. So if you notice an issue on one person's device, well, fix it for all 50 people. So as we look at the price per ticket, we know through the measures that service desk tickets are usually about $22 per ticket. Things that get escalated to a more expensive resort, like level 2, level 3, certainly cost more. But we are trying to drive towards self-service. You would expect self-service maybe to be free, but it's not. Obviously, there's time, KBs to be written from the knowledge management team. But it's just a fraction of a cost if you do it yourself. And then ultimately, level -1 is what we really see the industry driving towards. And this is using DEX software, digital employee experience software, so that we can, instead of being reactive like every other level here, now we're being proactive and preventative. So we're able to look into an end user's device, see what's running on their hardware, their software, understand where issues lie, and ultimately self-heal those devices with automation. And it's a mass heal effort as well, because at the end of the day, you're not trying to just heal one device. If you see the configuration and 50 other devices that are causing an issue, fix that before everybody calls in. So today, generally speaking, we see about 70% of tickets resolved at the service desk level 1. The escalation obviously is handling to the right. We're seeing very little as far as tickets being resolved by self-service and DEX today. But the way to really increase the support level and reduce cost is changing the ticket mix. And so as you start to really introduce a very refined self-service portal, level 0, your DEX tools really start to kick in and resolve issues before people have tickets to enter. Less is done at level 1, 2, and 3, and ultimately that shift left drives down cost. So what we're going to do is deep dive into a couple areas here for us. And the first one we're going to focus on is this level -1. It's the one certainly getting the most inquiries from Gartner these days. And it's a kind of a new way to support that hasn't been used historically at large scale, but that is changing rapidly. So DEX software, there's a lot of providers out there for this type of software, but what it does, it's able to get into a device. It's through a small agent, and it's constantly recording what's going on with the device. What's the hardware? What's going on with the software? What about the connectivity to the network? It's looking at all the things that impact the end user experience with their device and their work. And ultimately, through that monitoring, it can be used to proactively resolve issues before end users even have a chance to call in. So we're getting proactive. So the way it works is there's a DEX score. I'm looking at the bottom left. So every user is going to have their own DEX score. Generally speaking, it's on a 0 to 100 scale, where 100 is you're having the perfect experience with your device. And 50 is a really, really bad experience. Most organizations are around 70, which is not great, but it seems to be functioning okay for most of the time. And this DEX score is derived with an agent is reporting everything back. And I'm in the top left now, where you're looking at data from the device, understanding what's going on across the entire network. And it could be a VDI, it could be a physical asset, Mac, PC, whatnot. And then we're able to see these dashboards and say, okay, here's what's happening. What are my critical applications, the business units that are revenue generators? How's my hybrid workforce compared to my working at the office workforce? You can compare DEX scores of the two groups to really see what's going on. And then from there, you can get the root cause by removing the friction from the end user and whatever issue they're having on their device. And then ultimately, you're able to apply that, through AI and automation to all devices in your environment. And in the future, you set it up for automated remediation. So no longer do you have to sit there, work the dashboard, log in each day, but you're able to say, okay, when you see this, here's the fix, just apply it. So ultimately, you're really driving tickets out of the equation. So a little bit more on how this works. I had the deck score on the left there, and I said, it's looking at apps, devices. You do get employee sentiment as well. So employees are able to say, here's what's going on with me. But the collector is deployed. I usually do that just through a CCM Intune type of thing. It's a small package that gets pushed, very small, lightweight package that really does not impact the end user experience. The Dex engine then collects all this data that's coming from, the thousands of endpoints in your environment and starts to classify it into ways that you can say, okay, here's what is going on. Here's what I can do today in order to improve my user experience. The Dex portal is where we work out of to get those analytics, see the trends and say, okay, these are going to be the things that we want to do today that have the most impact. And then ultimately, there's a nice Dex library. You're able to go into these scripted investigations, and do things that are already kind of preordained for you. You know that if you're having an issue with this application, here's what we're going to use to run to resolve that. And then ultimately, long term, you want to see these Dex score dashboards. Maybe you start at a 50, and over the first year, you get that up into the 70 range, and then year two, you get up to the 80. Ultimately, what you're doing, though, is you're really having a positive impact on employee productivity. You're not seeing the blue screens of death. You're not seeing the huge delays in productivity applications. You're getting to the root cause of what's causing the user to have issues, fixing it, and you're really improving the productivity of your users. The way that this is kind of run, this is just a sample roadmap, of course, but once you deploy the collector, you have it out there to start to gather data on your end user's experience. The hardware score is a really good one to start with. You can look at different hardware types. Do you have HP, Lenovo, Dell in your environment? What's the difference between those? What employee scores are better based on the hardware type? What kind of RAM is in the device? All those kind of things. Application score is very important as well. Now we're looking at both on-prem and SaaS apps to see what kind of application hangups are having. App crashes are very common here. The network, we talked about a couple times now, but it also gets into the operating system. We saw one client who their average boot time, so when an end user restarted their device, to the time they had a screen that they could work on was about 7 minutes. Just a very, very long boot cycle to get to that screen where you can do some work. And we got to the root cause of that. There were too many things trying to launch at the same time, too many scans happening in the BIOS. So we reordered things in the BIOS and were able to reduce that boot time to about 1.5 minutes. Again, much better end user experience when it comes to when it's time to reboot, right? And then a little bit of repetition here, but using AI and mass heal is how we get proactive. We ultimately are doing that shift left we talked about on our earlier side to drive cost savings, and the end user experience really improves. People are much happier with their devices. John, anything you want to add? Yep.
Yeah, there's two other cool things about it too. Is with that hardware score, often, it doesn't happen very often, but sometimes you have a brand new device that's it came off the manufacturing line just with a bug or something, and it's just crashing all the time. With something like this, when you're doing a refresh, you could identify devices that are maybe relatively new or maybe only the first or second year of being deployed, and just notice that that score is really bad. And you can decide to either, hey, I'm going to immediately send a ticket out to that user and say, hey, why don't you go order a brand new device? And when you can have that device returned to Insight, and Insight can troubleshoot what is wrong with it and potentially, get an RMA on it and get, refunded from the vendor, or directly replaced with a brand new unit. And another cool thing you can do here, and maybe it falls under the strategic side, is you can do campaigns. So if you're noticing like users are leaving their computers on all night long, and that's driving up your energy consumption, you can actually run campaigns to those end users, and it will pop on their screen and say, hey, please log off at the night at the end of the day, and it will actually measure the results of after initiating that campaign, and it'll say, well, how effective was that in getting people to turn off their computers? And so there's a lot of things that you can figure out, and maybe it's not an AI or mass heal, but it is a user education thing that is somehow making the machine more productive or less cost to run.
Yep.
So some other really cool things that a platform like this can do for you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. ESG is certainly a part of something that kind of is related to this. I know there's a lot of ways you can potentially do that, but if you don't have a way to really try to improve your ESG footprint, this would work. The hardware score, another thing to maybe add there is, a lot of companies have set refresh cycles. Every 3 years, I get a new laptop. Um, but with a tool like this, you're able to say, okay, here's my devices that are, 2.5 years old. Let's take a look at those as a cohort and say, what is my device score for these? What we're seeing is a lot of customers, instead of doing just a straight up hardware refresh, they're doing some intelligent sweating of their assets. So that, devices that are still running just fine at the 2.5 year mark, potentially it could just be maybe they add some more RAM to it. Maybe it doesn't need anything at all. But, you're able to extend hardware refresh cycles. Earlier on, we talked about the price of this kind of a device channel being about $0. And that's because of the positive ROI from doing things like delaying a hardware refresh, because you got a perfectly good device. Don't stick to your set refresh cycle if you have a tool like this, right? Another client that we're working with on this DEX, if they have Java running after October of this year on any device, and they have about 22,000 devices in their environment, they're going to have a bill of about $2 million is what we're told, because of this can't be running in their environment. So they don't have a great tool to really assess where Java may or may not be running. And this is the tool they're using for that. They're able to see all the EXEs that are running on all the machines in their environment and pinpoint this. So I don't think that's probably a common use case, a little bit extraordinary, but it's something that they're using this tool for to avoid that penalty. Wanted to just kind of walk through one scenario of, how does this work in the real world? And, obviously the DEX is out there with the agent monitoring what's going on. I've read a stat, and it's about 20% of blue screens of death get reported into the service desk. Most people get the blue screen of death, hold the power button for a few seconds, the device comes back up, and they just try to keep on working. But when you're monitoring a device, you're able to see all the blue screens of death. And if you see somebody having multiple ones, you reach out to them. You try to resolve the issue first through the automated tool. But if you can't do that, we put them in touch with the service desk, who then is trying to resolve it on first call. A lot of times with the blue screen of death, it's probably something more than a level 1 agent can do. And then through an automated process, we get this end user in touch with the scheduler so they can schedule that appointment we talked about. And again, screenshot of that coming up here. But that end user then, like John earlier, gets to schedule the time that's convenient for them. Hey, tomorrow 8 to 9, I'm open. And then at the time of the appointment, our tech hub team would start that video appointment, connect into it, troubleshoot it, and try to resolve the issue. Most of the time, that's going to happen. But if not, if it's deemed that, hey, we need to replace this device, maybe there was a security breach and you have no other choice but then to replace it, take it offline, wipe it, and get it back into your stock. We have a couple options for the user. Certainly the on-site replacement can happen. We talked earlier about smart lockers, or if you still have your desk side techs, that works as well. Advanced exchange is another great way to do it. That's where next business day, we ship out a unit, and it's in 2 boxes, kind of overboxed with one, so that the user gets their new device the next day. Ideally, you're in a modern provision work stance, so that the user just works with it right. As soon as they connect to the network, pulls their profile, their apps, their data, their access, and they're ready to go. And then they just use that second box to ship it back to us. But either way, the end user gets a device very quickly. It's no longer, I think historically it's been 5 to 8 days for a user to get a backup device if they work remotely. Now we're seeing it next business day. So a great way to help impact productivity of the end user in a positive way. John, anything to add there?
Well, in addition, the shortcut it too is, if you do have tech hub resources on site, that appointment could also be scheduled with a tech on site too, right?
Absolutely.
So it's really flexible, where you can use that in a hybrid environment on site and schedule a follow-on appointment remotely, whatever you want. It doesn't always have to be just remote.
Yeah. When I bring up that screenshot in a minute, I'll try to point that out as well. But thank you, John.
Yeah.
All right, shifting gears just a little bit. We just focused on level -1, but now we just want to talk a little bit about level 0. This is the self-service. A lot of this is more than just, hey, can I reset my own password? But it's, service catalog workflows. so that I can go, if it's time to refresh my device, if I don't have a DEX tool and it's deemed that, hey, it's 3 years, pick up your new, pick out your new device, I can do that myself. You can even do that through a chatbot these days so that I don't have to log into a service request catalog, but I can just have a conversation. The chatbot will present, hey, here's the 3 models you can have, and off we go. And we kind of pair that with that tech hub, the level 2, scheduling appointments and doing some white glove approach to it. So let's take a look at this one in action. So now this user needs a new mobile device. Could be everything from, it's time for an upgrade, they lost it, it's broken, whatever. And they start and initiate a conversation with the chatbot. So we're all self-service at this point, no live agents. And the chatbot goes out into the system, the mobility system, and takes a look at that user. What are they entitled to? What are they eligible for? What are the plans available to them? And it brings that catalog and presents it back to them in the chat tool to say, hey, here's the options you can choose from. That ties right into the ITSM so that all the workflows are automated. Certainly, it might have to get approval, but that's okay. We get that through the chat bot to the approving manager as well. So it's very easy for a manager to approve this type of request. Ultimately, it goes through the procurement process. The ITSM is updated. So everything about what's happening with this device is being updated. Who's it assigned to, what transit states it in from the manufacturer. And then ultimately we put it through a mobility lab. So that pre-configures everything. So once it does get to that user, it's ready to go. And that can include, everything from asset tagging and cases and whatever else you might want to need to do that device. The order is shipped to the user. Doesn't matter if they're on-prem or a remote user, they'll get that device to their house or the office. Help desk could help support them as needed, but most of us know what the experience is like with a new phone these days. It's just ready to go. And then ultimately, we tie everything back into the ITSM, so it updates the ticket, and it also updates the asset management system as well. So a full solution that is very lightweight, very good user experience, a lot less human involvement when it comes to it, which keeps the cost down. John, anything on this one?
And if you're on a platform like Intune, you can have a very similar experience with desktops, laptops, etc. That phones just happen to be a lot further along in the provisioning process. But if you're a modern provision environment, like you mentioned earlier, you could use a service like this for your laptop replacements. And if you didn't want a chatbot, it could be a self-service website too.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, so this is a great example of all right.
The art of possible.
Yeah, the art of the possible for not just your mobile phones.
Yep, very good point, sir. Very good point. We mentioned Tech Hub a few times, and we just wanted to talk about this. And this again is where a user can schedule time for the appointment with that escalated support. We'll start on the right with the image we pulled out here. But when it comes to scheduling, we know that not everything takes the same amount of time. So let's say you're having an issue with your monitor, docking station, keyboard at the top right. 45 minutes is more than enough time. A printer install, 30 minutes doesn't work down that side. But if you have a new PC coming, that might take a lot longer, especially if it's not a modern provision employee type. And one of the things, John, it's not on the screenshot, but you can put underneath the 1 hour, is this on site or remote? You're able to choose if you want to do this in person or over the phone.
Yeah.
But ultimately, what we see, kind of going back to the channels of support, we know that walk-up support is probably the highest rated channel out there. When employees talk about what was my CSAT with my experience, they love walk-up support. A chatbot, frankly, one of the lower rated CSAT channels. People generally don't like to deal with a chatbot. What we're seeing with Tech Hub, when people are able to schedule their own time to meet with IT, they get that kind of VIP white glove approach that's really focused on them for that time they selected. It is right up there with walk-up support. People love this type of support channel. And we've seen kind of an interesting nuance in this recently. This one, what we're looking at on the right, is a kiosk. And according to the manufacturer, and this is kind of just the trend that we're seeing is they're starting to run behind and being able to produce this type of form factor because of the popularity. But ultimately, what we're looking at is for an office, let's say it's an office where you don't have the same population you used to, or it's a remote office where, you only have a few hundred users. It's not a big corporate office. This is a great way to augment your support because a person's able to walk up to this device at the touch of the screen. They can get a live person that's talking to them through video conferencing. You can put your device on the countertop that you're having issues with. They can remote into that and try to resolve that. Ultimately, if it's deemed like, hey, there's a security incident on this device, we need to get you a fresh one, they can pop a locker below that for the end user to get their new device just right there on demand. It's all tied back into the ITSM and ITAM system, so it's updating tickets in your asset management tools. And then, once you are about halfway done with your locker, you can dispatch a technician to go there, get the old ones, restock it with new ones. These could be PCs, mobile devices, whatever. And you're just able to really support this user remotely through an all-in-one kiosk. Pretty cool form factor, a good price. I think I covered most everything here, but there's certainly a badge reader on there so that we can identify the employee. So there are some security controls when it comes to that. But a very cool use case that we're seeing in the industry. So ultimately, we talked about the real key here is better support and lower cost. That's really what we're hyper focused on. And what we're seeing on general, it costs about $500 a year for clients to support an end user when it comes to the channels we were talking about earlier. But as you implement these different types of channels and doing it in maybe a different and better way, you really start to drive cost out. What we're seeing when people kind of say, okay, let's focus on the level 0, level 1, level 2 approaches, they knock a good 20% off their price. And then there's additional cost savings to be recognized too when we start using bots and orchestration, the DEX tool we talked about as well. And ultimately, it fits into what we envision as workplace service at Insight. Across the top is really that, managed user support. We mentioned all those things. Modernized support on the left, the decks, the lockers. We often start with an assessment, so we understand where you are today in your journey, so we can be very prescriptive and diagnostic as a partner to come in with a way to really support you properly. And John, then you touched on earlier a few things around just how do we support in the field the devices that are out there through managed deployment, dispatch, residency. But ultimately, this is kind of our vision of how do we give them a great user experience and focus on cost savings. If you are interested in more information from Insight, there is a QR code here that you can scan. You're able to do that, and we can schedule a strategy session with you. Like I said, very specific to you. It's very lightweight as well. It doesn't take a lot of your time, a couple meetings worth. We'd like to understand your ticket data to see what's happening today, see what tools you're using today, compare that to kind of industry best practice, and then provide recommendations that are specific for you on how you compare to the industry, some benchmarking, and steps you can take in order to kind of improve your end user support environment. All right, that's it for me today. John, anything you wanted to add?
No, well done, David.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you to our speakers for today's broadcast. Please make sure to register for the upcoming webinars in our Power Modern Work series using the link in the supporting materials widget on the right side of your screen. If you have any questions or would like additional information, please visit our website, solutions.insight.com.